Good evening. Welcome to the March 9th, 2023 meeting of the Dover School Committee. My name is Sarah Gutierrez-Dunn, and I call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. We are pleased to hold this open meeting at Chickering School this evening. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed with DSC TV and also recorded. Thank you for joining us. Shortly, we will hold our public hearing on the Dover School's proposed fiscal year 2024 budget, but we have two items that come beforehand on our agenda. First is an opportunity for community comments to the degree there are comments that do not pertain to the budget. Then we will have a discussion for committee members on changes to the budget since our last meeting, and then we will open our public hearing on the budget, at which time there will be an opportunity for any members of the public to make comment or ask questions about the budget. And so we turn to the first item on our agenda this evening, which is community comments. We've provided a Zoom link for those who wish to make a comment, but for whom it is not possible or preferred to attend in person this evening. But Beth, I believe we don't have any participants on the Zoom at this point. All right. So is there anyone with us today in the audience who would like to make a community comment that does not pertain to the budget? All right. Hearing none, then we will move on to the continued discussion on the fiscal year 24 budget. So Don, would you like to walk the committee through the changes since our last discussion?
Yes, Sarah, thank you. And I have some changes and then just some additional information that wasn't impacting the budget, but that I wanted to share with the committee. So we have bringing forward two adjustments, both are salary related. One represents savings of the $85,000 from known retirements. As you know, we usually wait until the February 1st date to bring those forward to you. So the $85,000 is what we are estimating our savings based on the positions that are being they're going to be replaced versus the veteran teachers who were in the educators who were in those positions. The second adjustment is in regards to our floating nurse. As you know, we added a 1.0 FTE to the budget across all 4 schools last year. Now that we have that in place and we're not running around dealing with COVID issues, the floating nurse has brought forward to us that she thinks a 0.8 is more appropriate. So the 0.2 reduction that we're taking it's going to be a 0.1 at each of the elementaries. If you remember, the main reason we brought the floating nurse on too was to give additional support to the high school based on the census and the ratio from students to nursing. So that makes sense to leave have the reduction here at the 2 elementary schools and leave the base at the region. So that amounts to $9,275. So in total, we are reducing your in-district budget by $94,275. You can see your new numbers. We are not making any further adjustments to the out-of-district tuition and transportation at this time. Let me just jump back up for a couple of things of in the in-district. One is we are watching the kindergarten enrollment right now. It's below 60 sort of known kindergartners who may be joining us. The good thing is that we also have a retiring classroom educator. So with that, we can sort of pause the posting of that until we get a better feel of how many kindergartners we're going to have. March 30th is their orientation, and at times more families arrive when there's a meeting to attend, so we will keep our eye on that. But we need to probably get up closer to like 66 to really run the 4 classroom sections based on our class size policy. So we will keep monitoring that, and we will obviously have more updates for you when we meet in May. So that was one thing we wanted to talk about. In addition, we've been talking about the district-wide reviews of both special ed and human resources. We do sort of know what the special ed review recommendations are, and at this time it has no budgetary impact on your operating budget. Same with the human resources. The majority of the impact of the human resources initially is going to be at the region. The region had their meeting on Tuesday night, and we did put a placeholder in their budget for that position, but at this point we don't see a budgetary impact at the locals, because you're actually your human resources right now sits with your towns. There could be a change of that going forward, but that's what we foresee for fiscal year 24. In addition, we are planning to add a second integrated preschool program next year based on the number of referrals that we were getting for pre-K students who need special education services who want to join our pre-K program. We are going to be funding that, though, both an educator and an educational assistant through the pre-K revolving fund. We have previously here had more than one preschool class, and that's been our past practice to fund one through the general fund, and if we have a second one, we fund it through the revolving fund, because as you know, we do collect tuitions for the students who join those classes. And we will keep you up to date on the progress of that, but that has been a decision that's been made, and they've been taking their registrations, but we just wanted to bring that to your attention. Jumping back to the out of district, I just wanted to mention that the mileage. So we did see a 17.5% increase in our cost per mile through Accept, and as you know, they transport the majority of our out of district students. We didn't have to actually increase your budget, though, because if you look at your number of placements, our placements have gone down. The miles of our students that we have now that we're projecting to be less than 24 are such that when we multiply out the cost per mile, we're actually at our same number. So had we not had reduction in our students, you would see an increase. But this is, we were able to not increase it, but we weren't able to decrease it because of less placements. And this was the same scenario, luckily, for your counterparts in Sherburne. So we were able to sort of absorb that increase because we have less miles. So those are the changes that we're bringing forward that incorporated into the budget that you saw, hard to believe, but back in November, if you can remember. And then these numbers now will be incorporated into the presentation that we'll do for your budget hearing.
Any questions or comments for Dawn before we move on? Colleen?
I'm just curious that the increase for the transportation mileage, was that just strictly due to fuel costs? Or?
It's fuel, it's wages.
It's wages.
Yeah, as we know, it's very hard to find van drivers, so part of that was a wage adjustment to the van hourly rate that they're paying the van drivers. As you know, fuel has also gone up. So it's a combination of trying to bring the cost up to where Accept can make it a successful program. And that's a discussion they have with all the business administrators of the area of the districts that are members. And we felt like it was important to increase their hourly wage so that we could attract drivers, because we all know back in our home districts that if we don't have drivers, and we saw that we've seen that before, 2 years ago, it's very stressful on the school district. So it's well worth the money to the districts to increase it. And keep in mind, too, we now are able to get some reimbursement for transportation, so that makes us feel even more comfortable doing it, because it's not dollar for dollar going back to the districts, but it's a dollar less what you maybe can get on circuit breaker. So we're able, I think, to make more aggressive cost decisions on that, knowing that it's not going to be a dollar for dollar hit to the budget. So it's a combo of that, and where they're struggling right now, and it's such an important part of our use of Accept that we want them to be able to continue maintain, and so I think that was part of the aggressive approach to that.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Yes.
I have a question about the salary adjustment based on retirement notification. Is there going to be any new hiring for that? Okay.
For both. For both.
Okay.
Yes, for the positions where people retire.
Okay.
But think about it, they are veteran teachers who've
yeah.
been here,
Yeah.
on the lower end of our matrix will hire.
Yeah.
So there are opportunities for savings. And I will say that sort of cycle of coming and going is what allows us to keep our budget sort of moving from year to year.
Yeah.
If we never had retirement, it'd be really hard for us to maintain sort of growing and the cost. So that's actually part of the normal cycle. And I think we do a good job of actually capturing that savings and pushing it back into your budget and not asking too much from the towns. So we're pretty good about being transparent about those.
Sounds good. Thank you.
not asking for an exact number or anything, but how far off of the 60 are we in kindergarten? Do you know?
Right now we have like 56.
Oh,
Yeah, so we're I said
Just a
we're just
little
under
under,
60,
yeah.
like at 56 was the number I got on Monday.
Cool.
So we shall see what happens. But as we know, that's why we're hesitant, right? Because the last 2 years we had census numbers and we were holding numbers and telling you guys, and then we'd show up and be like
Totally different.
amazed at where all these kindergartners came from, right? So we won't make any decisions
Right.
prematurely,
Right.
knowing that has been something that we've seen. Now, I will say, if you look at the housing market, it's been a little slower now than it has the previous 2 years. So I think that's another thing will factor in. But we want to have 4s, but we really need to have the numbers so we don't have 14 and 15 in a class. So, so recruit, I don't know, right? But we'll keep an eye on that and keep you guys updated on as the numbers get firmer.
All right. Anything else? All right, so at this time, I would like to open our public hearing on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024. And we are pleased to present a budget that I believe not only serves the evolving needs of our students, but does so in a way that is fiscally responsible to the town of Dover and to its taxpayers. And we are so fortunate to have at the helm our superintendent, Beth McCoy. And I will turn it over to you to introduce us to the budget. Then we're going to provide an opportunity for any members of the public to comment or ask questions on the budget, after which we will close the public hearing and allow committee members to ask any remaining questions before we take a vote. So, Beth, turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'd like to, of course, recognize the taxpayers who support our students and our educators day in and day out, and especially the Dover Warrant Committee for working with us to make sure that we can provide for our students as we see fit to meet the needs of the district. I'd also like to thank all of you sitting at the table who continue to support us from month to month, week to week in the work that we do here. And most importantly, I'd like to thank Dr. Reineman for her work with us on this budget to support Chickering, and Dawn Fattori, of course, who does 3 budgets all year round, is often living in 3 different years, and we couldn't do this work without her. So thank you, Dawn, for your hard work and attention to detail. So that said, on the next slide, you'll see the assumptions that are driving our budget. Certainly, we want to continue the fantastic work that we're already doing, and luckily we'll have level enrollment moving forward. So we want to maintain our programming for our next group of incoming kindergartners and anyone who joins us. We, of course, want to be respectful of the guidelines that come from the Dover Warrant Committee and be respectful to that which the taxpayers provide us. And all of the work that you'll see and all of the pieces of the budget that you will hear about tonight, of course, are in line with our district plan. They always say how you spend your money says a lot about what you believe and value as a district. And so the 5 buckets from our strategic plan under Dr. Keough continue. I don't foresee them shifting much in our next iteration of the strategic plan. They're serving us very well. As a reminder, our focus is around innovative teaching and learning and making sure that we're preparing our students for a ever-changing world. That we're looking at the whole child and the well-being of our students and staff to make sure that we're meeting the social emotional needs so that everyone is able to learn at high levels. Partnering with the families and the communities. Certainly we couldn't do this work without the support of our parents and caregivers who volunteer, who share their expertise, and of course provide funding options through a variety of different means. Safe and innovative facilities. As you know, we continue to do work to make sure that our schools are safe for our kids and up to speed in terms of the best opportunities out there, both for safety, but also in innovation and thinking about having spaces where our kids can learn and play and create with our teachers, and resource efficiency. As you know, Dawn is incredible about making sure that we are being fiscally responsible and spending smartly, and making sure too that we are using our special education resources efficiently as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And of course, we're still, even though the pandemic is officially over, we're still dealing with the aftermath that the pandemic had on both our students and our staff. So we continue to look at the needs that they have academically in terms of their social emotional wellness and their behaviors, and try to adapt as necessary. So that's what drives our budget. And as Dawn will continue, you'll see where the numbers all fall out.
Great, thank you, Beth. So as you remember, as you recall, and as you know, we look at your budget in two distinct pieces, the in-district and the out-of-district. So looking at the budget drivers for the in-district, obviously payroll people are what runs the school. So their payroll represents approximately 85% of the in-district operating budget. And the key budget drivers this particular budget season are, if you recall, we were maintaining a reserve for contractual agreement increases for all employees in the budget, including the step and lane increases for educators, which range from 4 to 9.8%. So most of our bargaining units will negotiate a COLA, so an increase in their hourly wage. In addition, for the educators, it's a COLA plus the step in lanes as they continue to have different years of experience. Our payroll is also based on our staffing, based on enrollment and student educational needs. And as we talked about the kindergarten class, that's how enrollment impacts staffing, and vice versa when we talk about educational assistants. As you know, we're going to increase 3. Your budget included increase of 3 this for fiscal year 24. 2 are interventionists that we have been paying for through our ESSER grants. So with that ending, we are bringing those into the general fund, along with 1 special educational assistant, and that is due to the needs of our students, right? So the cohorts that are currently here. Because if you recall from our discussions in November, we actually this summer converted 2 special ed education assistants into a special education educator. That sounds weird. Special education educator in order to better serve students. But at the same time, the current cohort made us need to add 2 EAs. One was added to the our special ed grant 240, and then one's in the general fund. So you can see how that is completely dependent on the students that are here attending Chickering. Speaking specifically about enrollment, we are, we remain supportive of 26 classrooms. Again, as I mentioned, we're monitoring the size of the incoming kindergarten cohort. Our current number is 499. Our projection, using approximately 64 to 66 kindergartners, I did grade it a little bit because we had been using in your projections the 3-year average, which was higher. It was in the 70s. Would give us a projection of around 513. Keep in mind too that we continue to have shifting of grades. So based on the cohort, the larger ones, the grade sections move with them, and so you could have a different number of second grade classrooms, third grade classrooms based on the cohort. So we just want to make sure that everyone knows there's shifting of grades, so they're understand that piece of the budget. We continue to do trend budgeting for all of our operating expenditure accounts. We didn't see too many decreases, but we did see some increases in special education contracted services. If you take a look at your operating statement, you'll see that is a line item where we are running extremely over budget this year. We think that we have plans in place so it won't be quite as high. Next year, however, we did need to increase it over fiscal year 23. And that really consists of services that students here who are on educational IEPs might need additional support that's not necessarily here in school. It could be at home, or it could be people who come here and just support students that aren't necessarily on our payroll. So that's when we talk about special education contracted services, that's what that encompasses. We also see an increase in your budget for technology devices as well as software. As you know, during sort of COVID, we brought a lot of more curriculum software into our world, and we're continuing to benefit from that, but we're bringing more of it into the general fund, using it more. So you saw an increase in that line item, along with we are now getting back to where we need to start doing more of our replacement of devices. So much of that was purchased with COVID money, but we're hitting the 3 years on some of these, and so you saw an increase in that particular line item in your budget as well. The other line item where we're seeing in the operating budget are utilities, obviously. We did increase your heating oil number to sort of be more in reality, I guess. We had been living in a great environment where our oil prices were below $2 As you know, we didn't even lock in a rate last year because it was over $4. We're paying, again, in your financial report, $320 up to $380 this year. So we did go ahead and up our budget to be more in line with what the market is showing us right now, as well as electricity. And I think we're all seeing that at home as well. We do lock in our supply price for electricity. And as I mentioned in November, our new contract, which starts in December of 23, we did, however, see a 40% increase in that supply cost. So we were able to lock it in when it was in a sort of a low place, but we had such a low price where we were starting from that we did see a 40% increase. So we've taken both those factors into account in increasing your budget. Those are all adjustments that were made or proposals that were made in your version 1. So just refreshing some of the things that we talked about. The budget drivers on the out-of-district obviously really is number of placements. We are projecting 18 in fiscal year 24. That's down from 21 in fiscal year 23. We are seeing declining, which is great. We even had higher in 22. The one thing that hurt us this year was the increase in the non-public school tuitions, and we talked about this in November. They were 14%. That was something that was across the board for all private schools who service special education students. Our public and collaborative school tuitions are estimated at 5%. With that, you know that we're down a couple of placements, which you would expect your budget then to go down. It did go down, however, it was all absorbed by the increase in tuitions for our students who are continuing with us. So we did have $200,000 savings that offset the increases. And so your tuition increases were $245,000. You had savings of $200,000. So you'll see that our net increase in tuition is the $45,000. So those are the two pieces. Had we not had the 14%, we actually would be talking about a negative reduction in that line item. And we've already talked about the transportation cost because that was something that we did not know when we met in November. So that is a cost per mile increase of 17.5%. However, with fewer miles, we were able to absorb that increase without further increasing the budget. So where does that put us? We have an overall budget increase for both pieces of a little over $400,000, which is a 3.94% increase. You can see the breakout between in-district and out-of-district. I think it's always good to look and see what the previous years were like. And I think what this is also good, it shows you that if you look at out-of-district, we were reduced in 22, reduced in 23. Without the tuition increase, we would have been reduced in 24. So that's actually a really positive trend. And I think it goes to show that the investment that we've made K-12 in the school system is actually keeping more students in. And obviously, it's much more economical to educate our students here in district than send them out and having to incur also the transportation cost. So I think that I wanted to make that caveat that although out-of-district tuition is going up, if we could strip out that anomaly increase, we'd actually show a decrease again. So that's I think good news that we are seeing that, and I think it shows that our investment that we've been increasing across, like I said, all schools is beneficial. Just as a point of information, remember that your out-of-district budget includes students age 3 through 22. So impacts or changes that we make at the region do impact your budget from that perspective. This is just looking at a 5-year by sort of major category. I know it's a lot of numbers up there. And it shows you the salaries, again, where I mentioned that was 86%. You'll see that that's how that plays out. We have our other educational expenditures, regular education, transportation, and buildings and grounds expenditures. So those categories together comprise your in-district budget, and then your out-of-district is your tuition and transportation. The other sort of unique thing that Dover has us do is that we budget as though we're not going to receive any circuit breaker. However, when you see your numbers presented at town meeting, it's always net of circuit breaker. So I think citizens have gotten used to it. But if you say you saw fiscal year 22 expended, it was 9.3, and then fiscal year 23 budget's 10.3, you'd wonder, like, why is their budget going up $1 million? So keep in mind that there is there's no reserve, no factor in your fiscal year 23 budget or 24 for the circuit breaker that's going to be received. It's not reflected in the town numbers until the year is over. We move expenses from our general fund over and wipe out the circuit breaker completely, and that's where you see the net numbers. So on this schedule, I like to add in the circuit breaker expenditures at the bottom so that you have a consistent look at your actuals with our budget. So you saw the numbers. We thought it might be helpful to say, okay, so let's break those numbers apart and look at sort of the components of it. So if we look at an overview of our educational services, which is our direct student support, our staffing is approximately $6 million, and it's comprised of your general education instruction, which includes your specialists, our literacy coach, our math coach, your SEL coach, their ELL educator, and all of our educational assistants. Then you have your special education category, which includes all the educators there, as well as your psychologists and your EA support in that category. We have guidance services, including adjustment counselors at 1.5 FTEs, and then your support services, including librarian and our nurses. And then you can see where we have the 0.15 is your floating nurse. That used to be 0.25. In last year. So that's 2.15. The expenditures, so these are classroom supplies, textbooks, our curriculum software, the special education line that I just talked about for students on IEPs, the technology needs, not only for students but also for our staff, and then professional development for all our staff. If you take those categories and add them up, that's $405,000. So if you think about your $8.12 or $8.2 million budget, 6.45 goes directly to students and supporting students. So the other half of that, or the other small piece of that, is administrative and related support services. So obviously, all of us at central office, you share in that expense. That also includes our director of student services, all of our business office staff, all of our IT staff, and all of the administrative assistants that support central office. In addition, you have your administrative staff here in this building with your principal, assistant principal, and their administrative assistants. And then we have our wonderful facilities crew who also supports this building. So with that, that's approximately $1.02 million in payroll. The expenditure side then includes the building operation and the maintenance expense, including all utilities, your transportation costs for your in-districts. Remember, this is just your Conley bus contract, and general non-instructional operating expenses that are things like the dues that we pay. Our financial software system, is about $9,000 right there for that. The few things that the principal's office needs, supplies at central office. So those are approximately $740,000. That's an easy one to go back and look where you see the categories, because you can see the transportation, the building, and then there's like $45,000 that you'll see that's in general non-instructional operating expenses. So that's approximately 1.76. So we add all those numbers up together. You might be a little bit short because I didn't go far out in the numbers, but that sort of shows you sort of the how much of our budget we actually put directly to student support, and how lean we run sort of in our overhead. Almost 80% of the budget goes directly to students. So I think I covered all that. Okay, looking at same sort of perspective overview of out of district, obviously the tuition costs are based on the placements. I think it's important for school committee to sort of see where those students are, to see students that might still have many years with us versus ones that might be close to graduating or aging out. And so you can see we have less than 3 placements at the pre-K to 5 level. which shows that we're able to keep a majority of students that have come our way here at Chickering. We have 11 placements at the K-12, so that would be students that would be at the region, and then we have 5 placements that are 12 plus. Because as I pointed out, remember, we cover students as needed up to the age of 22. So the tuition costs associated with those 18 placements is $2.185 million. And then we have our transportation costs, which we talked about. We predominantly use Accept collaborative transportation, but we also reimburse parents as well. So both expenses from those are in your $372,500. And then we obviously have the circuit breaker reimbursement, which I think is important to share, to know that the $10 million budget that you're bringing forward will be offset by approximately $1 million worth of circuit breaker reimbursement that covers now not only tuition but also transportation cost. And it's sort of a complicated formula. One of your meetings I can go through that, but it's something that we file annually. So what circuit breaker we're getting this year is based on the expenses that we had last year. So that's sort of how that plays out. So that is sort of an overview of the budget, and hopefully that's gives some even our watching audience a little more perspective on what comprises the $10 million. The other piece is your capital request. And if you recall back, now I'm going to say that's probably in October, we approved the flooring for the 2nd and 3rd grade classroom wings for $130,000, and we are going to be replacing our fire control panel for $45,000. So our total requests to the town for fiscal year 24 are $175,000. So that brings us to the wrap up, and I will turn it back over to Sarah.
Well, thank you, Dawn. It is no small feat to present the budget with such thoroughness and such clarity, so thank you. And we also would like to thank the town of Dover and its taxpayers for their ongoing investment in education. It is a huge aspect, I know, of what brought my family to Dover, and I think many of us. So we thank you. And we also thank the Dover PTO for partnering with us to support Chickering and to strengthen our school community. So it takes a village. All right. So are there members of the audience tonight who have any questions or comments concerning the proposed budget?
We're on Zoom.
We're no longer on Zoom.
All right, and so at this time, I will close the open hearing and turn it back to school committee members for any remaining questions that you might have before we take our vote on the budget. Anyone?
I just have sort of a general question. It seems like it's getting more expensive to educate our students, our Dover students outside of out of district, and we're making lots of efforts to keep them in. Is that part of the thought of the additional pre-K classroom? That some of that is like.
So you have to provide services if someone presents with a disability, right? So they've been evaluated and referred to us. So they can come and have services where they just drop in services, or they can request to be in an integrated preschool program. There are ratios so that you have to have peers with those students. So we don't have enough spots to accommodate how many pre-K students have been referred to us who want to be in the integrated preschool. So therefore we have to open up a second classroom so that we have enough seats to cover those students, and with that means we'll be able to actually offer more openings to their peers.
Right.
And so there'll be those numbers plus double in peers that will be able to join the program. So we've had 2 programs here in the past that ebbs and flows based on the referral program. You wouldn't want to run just a preschool. We're here to run integrated preschool programs, so you need to have those students being referred here in order to have the program. And so we had closed the second room a couple of years back because the ratio was like 2 to 10. And that's not what we're here for. And so therefore we sort of structure, what we offer based on what the need is out there. Had we not opened the classroom, because we haven't always had a preschool program here. There was one year that Dover actually placed 6 Dover students in Pine Hills preschool program because they had already had one historically. It was right at that when we started seeing numbers like that they brought a preschool here to Dover. So we actually paid tuition, out of district tuition, for those students to go to Pine Hill. So we have definitely saved the district out of district tuitions by having an integrated preschool program here.
Other questions, comments? All right, so at this point, I would like to invite a motion to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Jeff. Is there a second?
Go ahead, go. A second.
Thank you. All in favor? All right. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So just thinking about next steps, I think in the memo I told you that Monday night is actually the public hearing for the town, which the schools are part of that budget. And then we have town meeting in May. And I mentioned in there, just to clarify, so if the town decides to borrow for your capital request, that's usually a debt exclusion, and you'll see that as a ballot question. I don't know how they're funding Chickering's right now, so I just make people aware of that, just in case you see it on the ballot when you're there and you wonder, like, why is the capital item there? Just would clarify that. The reasons usually is always borrowed money, so there's always, so we don't really know that that's actually completely approved until election, because there is, I don't know if I've ever seen this happen, but the voters could vote that down. So just keep in mind, if you go to the ballot, you see that, vote yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So moving on to our superintendent's update.
Great. Thank you very much. I will provide some updates, and then Denny has some exciting things about teaching and learning, which I just realized I kind of missed talking about a little bit, but you do a better job than I do, so we'll share the responsibility. So just a few highlights. I always enjoy my time visiting here at Chickering with Dr. Reineman and going into the classrooms. I will say in the last month, Denny and I are kind of circling around and finishing our entry process. So as you know, we've been meeting with community members and educators and town officials, and most recently we met with 4th and 5th graders here at Chickering. And we got to hear what they love about school and what they would potentially change, and what kinds of learning work best for them. So I thought I would highlight a few things, but not, of course, ruin the surprise that you'll see when the entry plan finally comes out. But our students love their teachers. That was the number one answer. They're nice, flexible, and kind. They feel that Chickering is a very respectful and welcoming environment, which we all would agree with. They love the music program and the band program. Certainly a highlight in their experience. They love the new 5th grade leadership opportunities that are provided for our 5th graders to go down and help in other grade levels. And of course, any sort of special day where they get to dress up a certain way or engage in a whole day of reading, and those sorts of things are highlights for them. They love learning that's hands-on, like science. Book clubs have become super popular here with our kiddos, and we've seen those happening in the classrooms during our visits. And any sort of projects or outdoor time is much appreciated. In terms of suggestions, there was a long pause because things are just, they are just so happy with the way that Chickering runs. So it took them a while to think about it, but they came up with a few suggestions. One is they worry about sometimes behavior on the bus, which I know Dr. Reineman and Mr. Carnes have well under control, but they wanted to say they do sometimes worry for their peers, and that they did admit that sometimes the older kids kind of stand up and help in bus situations. So when you're not there, Dr. Reineman, the kids are in good hands. That's good news. More time outdoors, of course, and once in a while, if we can mix up the lunch options, that might not be a bad idea. But otherwise, things are going very well here at Chickering, and we want our educators and our leaders to continue the good work. So thank you for all that you do for our kids. Another highlight, so on Friday, I had an opportunity with 44 other superintendents from the Tri-Valley region to meet with many of our legislators from the state level. It was held in Newton, so I got to see former interim superintendent Kathy Smith, who hosted. It was great to see her, and it was an opportunity for us as school leaders to present to our congresspeople our concerns around what bills need to go forward from our perspective in terms of what's going to have the greatest impact on students in the Commonwealth. So there's 4 things. I'll just go over them briefly. One is the concern, luckily, as Dawn explained to you here in Dover, we have a decrease in the number of students who need out-of-district placements, but that's not the case in many other cities and towns. And so there are districts out there who are having to cut 5% of their general education staff in order to meet the 14% rise in out-of-district costs. So many of our towns are looking for a pothole fund to kind of soften the blow the first year and then prepare for the second year in order to meet those financial needs. The next 2 are related in that we are looking to both lower the thresholds to get circuit breaker reimbursement so that it's not such a high number for us to get reimbursed for the services from the state, and to increase the percentage that we are reimbursed once we meet that threshold. And lastly, there's a general concern just around special education as a whole and how we're meeting the needs of our students with disabilities across the state. So perhaps if we could come together at the state level and look at it as a larger issue and share our ideas across the state through a commission, we might be able to come up with some better ideas on how to support our students both within the districts and within our private and public placements otherwise. So that was that. We have had 2, and Denny will talk about another, audits here in the district. So as you know, we have to adhere to state laws and mandates, and the mandates come with expectations that every few years we can have state officials come in and take a look at what we're doing. So recently we had DESE come in and look at our special education program and our English Learners program. And I will say that DESE, they ask for documents ahead of time, then they do interviews while they're here, they go through our files to make sure what we said are in the files are actually there, and then they measure it against their expectations. We had a glowing review for special education, and they wanted to commend all of our staff, and certainly Kate McCarthy for her work in the district around special ed. I won't give away your surprise. Also, parallel to that, we had our own independent consultants come in. So as you know, in 2018, 2019, we had Dorsey Yearly and Deb Levine, who are both retired special education administrators, come and look at our organization of special education administration within the building and within the district K-12 to make sure that we have enough support, which resulted in a reorganization. So now that we are past the pandemic and a few years into that, we asked them to come back and say, how are we doing both with our administrative structure, but also the additional programs that we've added, because we have added goals and Grit and Bridge across the district. So they were here, lots of commendations based on the feedback and what they saw, and feedback from educators and parents alike, really to commend our special educators for the skillfulness and commitment they have to our students. They've seen a reduction in the number of students who are outplaced. We've brought a lot of students back into the district, which is fantastic. And students who otherwise in years past would have been sent out of district, we've been able to keep in the district. So the work that we're doing around the additional programming and the tier 1, 2, 3 interventions that we're providing kids are actually working to keep our neighbors and our friends here with us. Well resourced here, parents are satisfied with the communication and the process. They're finding more consistent processes and practices happening across the 4 schools. And again, the MTSS process seems to be working because there are fewer students who are recommended for special education testing, which means that we're catching needs earlier on through our MTSS program, which is fantastic. A few recommendations, again, cost neutral, luckily. Right now we have one special education administrator who oversees both Pickering and Pine Hill, and then we have one team chair who oversees the meeting and a lot of the organization around the meeting process. What they recommended is that we change that to being 2 coordinators, so 2 administrative positions, so that we can support the programming and the educators in that programming, evaluate and make sure that they're growing, and to manage the team meetings, which sometimes can be challenging. So what we're looking to do is to have one administrator pre-K through 2 across both Pine Hill and Chickering to continue that continuity and consistency between the 2 schools, and then another one 3 through 5. At the region, there'll be one at the middle school, one at the high school. So that's a change, but cost neutral. Looking to further define some of our programming so that parents are aware what's available to them, continuing to make sure that our general ed and special education teachers are collaborating to make sure that we're looking at children as our children and how can we work together to meet their needs within the classroom. Looking at our educational assistance support, they find that relative to other comparable districts, we are very reliant on educational assistance to provide services to kids. So we want to look at that pre-K through 12. And then the workloads of our related service providers, so our BCBAs, our OTs, our PTs, just to make sure that they are not overtaxed with the caseloads that they have and make adjustments otherwise. So that is the audit. Human resources update. So as you know, we've been thinking about adding a human resource position to our team. We've had Dr. Tom Campbell, retired human resource director from Needham, working with us. We are prepared to have a report from him by March 1st that would have outlined the job responsibilities and kind of what level of administrative position this would have been. Unfortunately, something happened in his personal life, which has set him back a couple weeks. Dawn and I both spoke with him today, and he's hoping to get us a report by next week. The good news is we will have a position. Dawn has found the funding for it. It will not affect the Dover and Sherburne local communities because it's primarily going to help at the region. Because we do have the supports of the two town halls to work at the elementaries. But we will move forward with that and let you know as we get the report what that looks like and how it's going to impact the work that we all do. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we had a fantastic webinar last Tuesday online. It was the third of 4 community forums. The first one that we did was more of a DEI 101 that Dr. Hoyt facilitated. The second one ended up being more of a town hall-like forum where we just kind of read the room and saw that many people had questions around DEI, and it was probably better for them to ask them openly and get responses from those of us, working in the district, so that everybody could hear and benefit from the responses. This last one we decided to do more of an informational session, so a webinar. And although none of us like to speak for 70 or 90 minutes, we thought it was an opportunity to make sure people were clear about what is DEI, what does it look like in the classroom for kids, what changes would we see, what is the research and the data behind it, how is it going to impact the budget, if at all. So we laid it all out with all of that information. We recorded it, so that anybody who wants to watch it at any time, whether they're a parent or a taxpayer, can do that. We did have time for some questions at the end. Those questions that weren't answered in the chat, we did follow up and answer in a document, as well as those that came in the exit ticket afterwards. So lots of positive feedback from that event. I'm sure you saw the article in today's Hometown Weekly about it as well. It's on the back page. And from the exit ticket, I just thought I would provide kind of a few examples of the continuum of feedback that we got. One comment was, this was very thoroughly, thoughtfully prepared. You are transparent, clear, and engaging. Another, a lot of information, but I get the gist. I don't really understand why some parents have an issue with cooperation and inclusion. Another, thank you for doing this tonight. I think it was a great discussion. I would prefer if there could be FaceTime with the speaker versus a slideshow the entire time. I loved the video from Challenge Success. I would have thought there would have been live chat with the event, but do like the way Q&A was taken at the end. Thank you. I would like to see a more inclusive and open dialogue. We are spoken to, and not allowed to speak. We need to have a forum where we can have an open and productive conversation. The current setup of writing a question down, then potentially getting an answer with no option to follow up to question response is once again giving the perception of secrecy and hiding behind Zoom. This isn't meant as an attack, but a request to be more inclusive. Thank you. But again, with all of the misinformation out there, we really felt like we needed to take control of the conversation and get the facts out there. And in fact, we did answer all of the questions either during the webinar or right afterwards. The next forum scheduled for March 30th will be more of an open dialogue. And last one, I'm so proud to have you all as leaders in our district. I stand behind this work 110%, and so appreciate all the care and effort that you put into this work every day. I have a kid at each level in this district, and 2/3 of my kids represent diversity in various ways, and the actions on the ground show that a majority of our staff and students care about equity and inclusion and work to create a sense of belonging. This work really matters in my family, in our schools, and in our community. Thank you. So that's where we are now. And again, our next one will be March 30th at 6:30 at the Sherburne Community Center, and it will focus on curriculum, both some of the books that we read at the elementary level, what is discussed in health class, the curriculum audit that Denny's leading, and what that looks like for our educators and how that might play out in the future. So we encourage people to come to that. And last but not least, the calendar task force has not been forgotten about. We have gotten documents and surveys and timelines from other districts. We had a discussion at our central office meeting this week, as well as our larger leadership team meeting, saying, do we want to launch this now? Other districts have been able to kind of manage it from an August to December kind of timeline with a preparation for January proposal, which is normally when we put the calendar forth, but realizing and remembering that it's more than just looking at holidays and celebrations, but also really thinking about what if we were to do 2 weeks of vacation in March, which I'm not going to be a betting person and say whether I think that would actually happen, but we do want to give some extra time and attention to it, so we will be launching it within the next week or so stay tuned. And thank you for those who volunteered. And those are my updates. Does anybody have questions about my pieces?
Oh, thank you.
Busy.
busy and out of breath. All right, Mr. Conklin, teaching and learning, the fun stuff.
So nice to be back with all of you. I haven't been at one of these Dover school committee meetings since September. So the last one in October I was supposed to be at, and then I found out that my son was being born. So the Dover school committee will always hold a special place in my heart. So as Beth mentioned, we've had a lot of DESE tiered focus monitoring, one of which was on our English language program. I have to give a big thank you to our teachers here at Chickering that agreed to get interviewed. Chris Luskow, who's our L coordinator, L teacher here, who does a phenomenal job with our students. I was actually getting to see her in action today with some of the students, which was really wonderful. We got our draft report back from the state, and they were very, very impressed by what they saw. One of the comments in our conversation afterwards was that we're a very low incidence district in terms of our L students, and they would send similar districts here to observe the work that is happening in Dover-Sherborne. In terms of recommendations, I thought it was just going to be one, but there's actually 2 recommendations that I found out about. One is a very minor one that just one of our teachers needs to get their sheltered English immersion endorsement, and we're already on that and have signed up that teacher for the class. And the second is just that they wanted to get a little bit more specific information about how we provide translation services to families. Again, something that we are working on, and with our new website, which we'll talk about, that's one component of providing good translation services for families who need them. So that it's nice to have that behind us now. We also just submitted all of our documentation for all of our federal grant tiered focus monitoring. So those are title grants, Title 1, 2, and 4. So that was a huge amount of documentation. I was bugging Mr. Carnes and Dr. Reineman for spreadsheets and documents, and got all that stuff together. So we'll be looking forward to seeing what the state says in regards to how we're using our federal grant money. From the teaching and learning perspective, one of the things I love is I'm going to be doing learning walks with all the assistant principals. Beth does them regularly with the principals, so I'm taking on the assistant principals throughout the district. So I'm doing that with Mr. Carnes next week. And I've been here at Chickering a lot lately. So I've gotten to see a lot of things. I've gotten to play games with kindergarten students. I got to talk about lowest common multiples with 4th grade students. So it's been really nice being in this building a lot more and just coming out of the classrooms and seeing what the kids are up to, which has been really, really nice. I continue to look forward to that. Then the 2 bigger things to talk about is the math pilot and the new website. So I'll talk about the math pilot first. So to give a little background on how this pilot came about, so both Pine Hill and Chickering have been using Everyday Math as the math program since the early 2000s. We're currently using the 4th edition, which was last refreshed in 2015. Since the time that both schools adopted Everyday Math, there have been some shifts in the way that we think about math education. I think the biggest one is the focus on practice standards in mathematics. So thinking about some of the big ideas with math, critical thinking, real-world connections, and problem solving, rather than it being more procedural and understanding step-by-step math. So there's been changes in the way that math education has been thought about since 2015, and certainly since the early 2000s. DESE has put together a list of programs on their Curate website that list all the different math programs available, and then a series of categories and which of the programs that are out there meets its expectations. So you can go on that website and see a list of all of the various K-5, K-8, K-12 math programs, and the ratings that DESE has given various math programs. We know that education has continued to evolve, focusing on some of the important skills that our Portrait of a Graduate has emphasized. So with that, we decided to get a look at our elementary math program and see where we stood. This year, we're piloting 2 different programs for math. Eureka Squared, which I'll talk about in a second. That pilot is actually finished, and Illustrative Math, that pilot is just beginning here at Chickering. One of the 3rd grade classes that started it. Both of these are approved by DESE. Both of them meet DESE's expectations for math programs. We wanted to make sure that we had that before we embarked on launching this pilot. So the tentative timeline for right now, and this is subject to change. So in the fall, teachers at both Pine Hill and Chickering piloted 1 unit of Eureka Squared, and we asked them to also pilot an assessment. We've gathered feedback from both students and from the teachers. We utilized a rubric that DESE put out about evaluating high-quality math programs. So teachers have filled that out. We just started to look at some of that data. And again, we did student surveys, so kind of a student attitude survey about math before the pilot and a student attitude survey about math after the pilot. Right now, we just had the professional development a couple weeks ago on illustrative math, so we'll do the same process with that. And in the late spring, we'll bring everybody together, compare the rubrics, look at student feedback and the data that we collected. We'll talk to our math coach and get the math coach's impressions of administrative feedback, because both Dr. Reineman and Mr. Carnes have been in classrooms to see these programs in action. And the goal is then to hopefully be able to bring forth a suggestion of which of those 2 programs we might pilot more in depth for the 23-24 school year. So either Eureka Squared or illustrative math. The goal then next year would be to do a more extensive pilot where we have 1 teacher per grade piloting the full curriculum for the year. And we'll kind of reassess at the end of that year. It very well might be that we will roll along with that program that we pilot more extensively and roll that out more fully. But if we find that there are significant issues, then we might have to go back and retool our strategy on that. Assuming that we do end up finding the program that works best, we're going to want to provide professional development for teachers on a new math curriculum. Then in the fall of 2024 is when we might be looking to roll out a new program. I don't envision at this time doing it K through 5 all at once, because that's a lot for the staff to absorb. So we'd be looking at kind of a waterfall approach to it. Maybe do K1 for the first year, then roll out 2, 3. But that exact timing is still to be determined, and we'll weigh other curriculum initiatives to make sure that our teachers don't feel overtaxed in new things that they're going to be learning. So a little bit of information about the 2 programs. So Eureka Squared, this gives you kind of the fun definition up there in the program description, which you can read on your own. For my own observations, Eureka Squared is a little bit more traditional. It focuses a lot on conceptual understanding of mathematics. The big thing about Eureka Squared is allowing students to see mathematical concepts in multiple different ways. So when I observed a Eureka Squared lesson, students were looking at multiplication, and they had 6 different visuals for how to see the same multiplication program. So that's a lot of what the Eureka Squared program has in common. It goes very in depth on very specific concepts, so that students can really gain a full understanding of those concepts before moving on. And like all the programs we looked at has a really strong focus on real-world connections, problem solving, having students work together on math problems, and conferring and building math discourse. A lot of interesting hands-on activities for Eureka Squared as well. Illustrative, this one's a little bit more fresh in my head because we just did the PD on this, is more open-ended. I think that what is different about illustrative is often the traditional model in math has been I do, we do, you do. So the teacher shows something, and they do it in practice as a class, and the students have some time for independent work. The illustrative model is more of you do, we do, I do, we do, or you do. So it starts out with the students and their voices, and then making guesses about mathematical concepts. It's like asking students to bring in their real life experiences and to gain some, or to put out some hypotheses about various math concepts. Then it'll often have some partner work or some small group work. Then it'll turn into more of a teacher-directed portion of the lesson, and then it'll end with some group work or some individual practice. So that's a big difference between Illustrative and Eureka Squared in terms of just the theoretical approach two programs have. I think the other big difference with Illustrative and Eureka Squared is Illustrative has math centers that are a big part of the curriculum. They're built into the time in K through 2 and then 3 through 5. They're a bit more optional, and teachers have some ways to build them in. So that's a difference with Illustrative as well.
Saying about Win or Tier.
Hmm?
Anything about Win and Chalmers and Tier.
Yes, I think that's on the next slide. Is it on the next slide?
Next slide.
So the criteria for selecting a program, again, we want to look at the alignment to content standards and the organization of the units. We're looking at grade appropriate practices. One thing that's really important when we're picking a program is differentiation. So for our L students, for our high needs students, for students with disabilities, but we also want to be looking at students who want enrichment opportunities, for students who might be above grade level in math, that we're picking a program that provides the opportunities for that full spectrum of students that we know we have in our classrooms to make sure that all of our students are really engaged in the math and that we're challenging students at all levels. Like I said, making sure the program has real life connections. We're rating these programs based on teacher usability, impact on learning, and alignment with our portrait of graduate skills. I didn't put this in a slide, or maybe I did. What's the next slide, Dawn? I'm sorry. Oh wait, we'll go back.
I was afraid to go to the website.
Now, one of the things that might be on your mind is why are we making a transition away from everyday math? And to kind of answer that question, I think the first piece is that our teachers here at Chickering and Pine Hill are doing an extraordinary job right now supplementing everyday math with hands-on problems, with extensions activities. And we're hoping to get a program that is going to kind of take that out so they won't have to do all that extra legwork and it'll be built right into the curriculum. I think another piece of it is the differentiation, which I just mentioned, and making sure that all of our students feel challenged. And another piece with everyday math is that it is very language-based. So a lot of our students, they get to a point where the language-based component of it presents a problem for students and is leading to more Tier 2, more Tier 3 interventions. So both Illustrative and Eureka Squared are a little less language-based, so we're hoping to just kind of catch more of our learners with this program as well. So that is the math pilot information. Before I talk about the new website, I'll see if you have questions about that.
That's not really a question, but more of a comment. I know that change can be scary, but times change, learning changes, and it's really exciting that you're exploring these and sound like awesome programs. I know it takes a lot of work, so appreciate you guys taking that on and helping everyone get comfortable with change.
Just to speak to that, an important part of what we saw in the timeline is that we don't want to do this too fast, because we want to give teachers an opportunity to hear about the programs from their colleagues, to explore things and not rush through things. And I've been trying to be transparent with teachers and say, if anything pops up that feels like it's not going to make this timeline work out, we're not going to just plow ahead. And we really want to take the time to listen to the teachers and what their feedback is. I have to give a lot of commendations to our pilot teachers who are learning a whole new curriculum this year just for 1 or 2 units. But they've been really excited and enthusiastic about it. And hopefully at a later school committee meeting in the year, I'll be able to give you some student quotes and some feedback on the 2 programs, or once we finish the pilot of Illustrative.
Danny, are these programs in use in other neighboring districts? Is one more popular than the other? Is one newer than? I'm just curious, sort of.
Yeah, they're both in use pretty frequently throughout the state. I think the only other 2 programs that you'll hear about a lot are Reveal and Investigations, being used in a lot of other districts. In my Accept Java-like collaborative, I would say a majority of those schools are using Illustrative. But we've also heard some really positive feedback about Eureka Squared from some districts as well. The hope is that next year, if we do end up on a program we want to more extensively pilot, that we'll be able to send some of our teachers to other districts where that program is in use to do some observations, talk to teachers about pitfalls in adopting a new math curriculum and hopefully be very prepared for a possible implementation the year after.
Of the four most popular programs, which Jenny just referred to, two of which obviously are illustrative and Eureka Squared, we wanted to pick two that did have a K-8 option should the middle school decide to go down a similar route.
I forgot to thank Superintendent McCoy, who's begun this process before we even got here.
It feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't.
Any other questions? So the last piece of my update is the funnest piece, I feel like, which is the preview of our new website. So as you may recall, we are currently working on launching a brand new Dover Sherborne website. So what you're seeing is the debut of the previews for what the new district homepage is going to look like. So you can see, well, maybe you can't see, it's hard to see. But there's a top toolbar or menu that's going to stay static. So as you scroll down, it will stay constant. It'll make it a lot easier to navigate between the schools if you have children in multiple schools. It has icons, so we took the results of the communication survey from the past and what people are actually going to the website to do to make things like lunch menus, which is one of the reasons people go to the website, to make that front and center, so that people don't have to go far to find things that they need. And then there's, in this middle panel here that you see, 3 different tabs. One is for news, one is for events. That'll be linked and synced to all of the school's Google calendars, so it'll be automated. And then this is the piece that you can see, which is the social media tab, and that is going to carry all of our major Twitter feeds. So the Chickering one, Pine Hill, high school, middle school, athletics, fine arts, the one that I run. So I think a lot of times people are looking for one place to see it all and what's going on in the schools. So this is going to provide one place where people can get a good handle on what's going on in the schools. I like it too because you don't have to even join Twitter to be able to see these things. So anybody can go on and just scroll through the Twitter feeds, even if you're not on Twitter. And a lot of the best updates that we have about teaching and learning in the classroom are happening via these Twitter feeds right now. As you continue to scroll down, that'll be the next slide, where there's a section that gives some important facts and figures. So as people are getting to know us as a district, they learn more about us. So a lot of times we're asked, where is Dover Sherborne? So we're about 20 miles outside of Boston. We put our student-teacher ratio, our average class size. Right now, I think in my count, we're up to 26 different languages spoken at home throughout the district. So just some interesting facts, and some of these will link to other things. So Portrait of a Graduate will link to a page on Portrait of a Graduate. Some of the stuff on our mission statement will link to another page. Then you can see the footer at the bottom. So that'll be the bottom of the first page. Another nice piece about the new website is that we've also maximized it for mobile view as well. So this is what the desktop view looks like. And it'll be nice when you see it on a phone. It's not going to look all funky and like squished together. It's going to be able to maintain the look and the flow that we want it to look like on a mobile device as well. So Anthony Rotacco, our Director of Technology, Allison Dillingsrud, who's the Assistant Principal at Pine Hill, have been leading a lot of this process along. But then all of the assistant principals at the different schools have really taken a big role in this. Angie Johnson, who's on the regional school committee, has been helping with this process as well. So the timeline for the rest of the new website, the big thing that we're doing right now is we are moving content from the old site to the new site, which is much more than I ever would have thought. It's literally thousands of pages on the old website that need to either just be trashed completely or need to be moved over to the new site. So it's been a bit overwhelming, but we're on top of it. We're designing new pages. And March to April, our IT team is going to be training admin assistants and other people who will be editing the website and how to do that on this new platform. May through June, the company that's doing this final site, they're going to fix a lot of the bugs that we find, kind of fine-tune things. We're looking in July 2023 to do a soft launch of the new website, meaning that the new website will appear, but we're not going to make big fanfare about it. And then mid-August 2023, once the new school year is kicking off, then we'll do the official launch to all the schools in the district. And people, as they're gearing up for the start of school, are going to want to know where things went to. But we're really, really excited about this. It's clean. It's going to be organized. And I was saying that one of the best tools for recruiting good teachers and staff is often our website. So to be able to present information about us, for them to be able to kind of see what we're all about, I think is going to be a really strong tool for that as well. New page that we're creating, we're going to create a new page for families who are new to the district. Because I know sometimes I've gotten some feedback that if you're new to the district, it's hard to figure out where to start, where do I find out about all the extracurriculars and support systems that are out there. So it'll be nice. That's one of the new pages we're working on, is our new families page. So that is that.
Can I add just a few things?
Oh, of course.
Translations are going to be super easy on the new website, as well as accessibility for people who need various colors or font sizes. You'll notice the pictures that have been showing up recently in our slide decks are very vivid and beautiful pictures. We have a father and also a resident of the towns who came in and did a whole photo shoot with our students in the classrooms, and so there'll be lots of wonderful pictures on the website, including a great new headshot of Denny and Dr. Reineman. And
drone footage too. So there's going to be video moving drone footage of all the buildings.
Yeah. And just many thanks. And Denny's very, thoughtful to bringing everybody else into the picture. But this is hours and hours and hours. And so, Denny and I can see each other's calendars, and there are literally chunks of time where he's working with the other assistant principals, evenings, weekends, afternoons for like 3 hours at a time. And they call it website fun, but it's literally going page by page of moving everything over or creating entirely new pages. So thank you for taking this on.
It's kind of fun. I like it.
Well, it's really exciting to think about, the prospect of being ready this summer to unveil a new website. So thank you for all of the work.
Yeah, thank you. It just from the look of it, it matches more of, I think, who we are, and definitely of the old website just is so dated, and our the way we educate our children is not, and so that disconnect is funny. But I also really hope that with a easy to navigate website, and I'll be honest, like I find the current one terrifying and I don't look at much of it, that it will answer a lot of people's questions and feel even more transparent, because a lot of our questions are on there. It's just hard to find.
And what you saw too, one thing is that's the district website. Each school will have its own new school website as well. That will very much have that same feel, and it'll all feel very cohesive.
And the team's done a really nice job of making kind of a flow chart of who's going to be trained in updating the website so that it doesn't get old and outdated the second day it's launched.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you. It's long overdue.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? All right. Well, Dr. Reineman, that brings us to you for the principal's report.
Thank you. My goodness, that's not what I
know.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. As you saw in our report, we've highlighted a few of the events from February and March. March Madness is underway, so Pine Hill and Chickering will now have our bracket of 8 books that we're reading. We're in week 2, trying to push them out into the family newsletter so you can enjoy them at home if you are interested. We did actually launch our Flash Mob surprise launch and we had so much fun. It was really very normal. So thanks to Priscilla Stefan and Kathy Gillis, who was our choreographer, who dragged us through to create a fantastic video of that. So those will continue, and then the winner of the March Madness PTO, through their generous funding, will buy a copy of the winning book for every classroom, which is what we've done for the past few years. So that's always fun and a surprise at the end. I'm a little disappointed my book is out already. Just going to put it out there right away. That was the best book in there. Chickering Cheers, we ran from for January and into February, so we're going to suspend that for a little bit. Very exciting to have a positive reward system. I don't know if you walked in, you noticed our fake refrigerator. Downstairs on the outside of the coach's room, there's this very silvery piece of paper, and as we started to talk to the kids and hand out the Chickering Cheers, we said, well, you're going to go home and hang this on the refrigerator. And some of the kids just looked at us like, what? We're like, no. So, of course, me being me, like, we have to hang it on our refrigerator. So we made our own fake refrigerator, and the kids got a little sticker that they then get to stick onto the refrigerator. So it's it was good. So we're going to bring that back in later on in the year, try and keep it interesting and exciting. The MCAS schedule, speaking of interesting and exciting, is posted for Pine Hill and Chickering. We'll be starting up in April, thanks to the work of Jim Carnes coordinating in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. That is underway. Infrastructure trials are coming. In our curriculum and learning section, we decided to highlight some of the things that are going on in classrooms. We're also doing this in the family newsletter at grade levels for what's going on in different units of study. So you see we've selected a few grade levels in here talking about what's going on. 1st grade is getting ready for their nonfiction animal report, which if you have a 1st grader, make sure you come in for the sharing. They have make a diorama and the kids become the experts at the zoo. So it's good fun. Personnel, Mr. Hart has announced his retirement at the end of this year, so he will be one of our retirees. The other is not public yet. And so we'll be figuring out how to possibly say goodbye to him. We did bring on Kelsey Albergo as a new Chickering educational assistant, replacing Dudley Baker, who has also retired. And we had Spirit Week, because let's go right up to February break with a bang, and, culminating with Read Your Heart Out Day. So it's been quite a busy winter for us. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Ask a quick question. Chickering Cheer is awesome. I'm curious if Panorama is running, right? Like, I guess I'm wondering, since implementing a positive reinforcement behavior system, if we're tracking, if it's impacting overall school behavior through, like, can you guys do that in Panorama? I feel like you'll probably see.
So Aspen feeds to Panorama, but that's not data that's likely to show up there.
Right.
So if we do SEL surveys through Panorama, which we do 3 times a year in sync with our academic assessments, it might show there. I don't know
To track that.
because it was such a finite time compared to when those data points were. So I don't think those are 2 systems that might match.
Yep, got it.
Thank you, though.
Deb, can you remind us on, we've got the MCAS testing schedule. When do the results tend to come to us such that, I know obviously it's only one data point, but it's a meaningful data point, and there has been a lot of fretting over, the scores and the pandemic's effects on students. So I'm just curious when we can expect to see either a preview or even a deep dive on results.
So we have preliminary data that comes to us at the middle of August, which is mostly a accountability piece to make sure that all the students who tested actually have results, not any analysis of the data. The final scores come to us in September for planning purposes, and then to the parents, I think they went out middle of October this year. So you get them about the same time we do. From there, we can use Edwin Analytics, which is a tool within the Mass Department of Ed ELAR site, which allows us to slice and dice the data a million ways, from curriculum to student to grade to class, which we use as we go through the fall planning for any curriculum changes. We haven't seen a major change in our trends over year, which is always an interesting piece. The data through the pandemic has been interesting to look at. Typically in 3rd grade, for example, you'd have 2 days of math testing and 2 days of ELA testing. In the pandemic, we had 1 day of each. And part of the reason for the 2 days is that there's 2 sets of questions. There's the actual test questions, and then there's pilot questions. I think they call them matrix questions that they're deciding if they're going to use or not. So I'm assuming in COVID year, there were no matrix questions, but I don't know that for sure in terms of which ones they release and which ones they use again. So it's an interesting piece which you get data on to use. So it is, like you said, 1 data point. I know we met with the 5th grade team last week, and we're looking at our science scores. They're getting ready to plan a curriculum enrichment event with Audubon and trying to decide which pieces that Audubon offers would be useful for our students to learn. And science and social studies were both content areas that we had to let go. unfortunately, through COVID. And so we're busy bringing back meaningful pieces. It's kind of an interesting opportunity. It's kind of like, I'll use the example when the closet rod broke in my closet. It was a great opportunity to not bring back up off the floor all the pieces that really didn't belong. So we'll use that as a science piece in that we can think about what should we be bringing back, what's going to be meaningful and useful. So one of the things we're looking at was energy flow through ecosystems. Was a piece where our students had some difficulty answering the 3 questions that were about that on the test. So again, you look at the data, if you have 3 questions and most of the students get 1 wrong, we have a 66% success rate on ecosystems. So the MCAS data is interesting, sometimes useful, sometimes not so much. So busy planning that piece. Does that help?
Very much. Thank you. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Dawn, that brings us to the warrant
The warrant report. So yes, you have your warrants that have been processed since the last time you met in January, and I continue to thank Liz for stopping by and signing. As we've talked about the budget, you can sort of see where we talk about circuit breaker, general, your general OOD is where we're paying out of district tuitions out of your general fund. But if you think about it, you take the circuit breaker and the general OOD, add them together, and that's really what's in your budget. But we deplete the circuit breaker fund as the year goes along, so that's why you see that. But that's sort of how it works from that perspective. So just wanted to highlight, since it was you've got a little bit of everything on here: capital, the grants, ESSER. We've been busy using our money.
All right. And then the monthly
report,
financial report.
yes. So we highlighted a lot of the monthly report, I think, when I was talking about the budget. If you recall, or I keep saying recall, but if you remember, I put the new information in bold. So there is a little bit of bold information here. On salaries, we just continue to see fluctuations from leaves, and sometimes the unpaid leaves actually then will have a change in our salary variances. And in this respect, I just wanted to note that we are having some unpaid leaves, and with that, we have to cover it with substitutes. And so our substitute line item now is actually over budget, but it's actually offset by some savings that are up in the different categories. You don't necessarily see those because we're running some negative variances for other reasons. But if you went and compared your report from month to month, you'll see some decreases. Other than that, you can see that we are operating maybe not in the right categories, but almost right on budget for salaries. On the expenditure side, we're at the point of the year where we start taking a look at what grant money we have, what we've put through the operating budget, and we had been carrying a large negative variance in textbooks, but we had also been sitting on our fiscal year 22 pandemic-related enrollment disruption impacting Chapter 70 aid money. So we opted to take a purchase from the Reader's Workshop implementation and pull it out of your general fund and apply it to that money that needed to be used this year. And in addition, we pulled one more invoice out and put it against the Title I grant. So now you'll see that negative variance has gone away. Both those were okay to do because they were one-time expenses. And so you're still reflecting what you need to buy. We were buying more. And we did it that way so that we could assess where we were and then go see where we could take care of it. But we did clean that up, and so those are reflected in your numbers. In addition, we looked at the utilities, and as I mentioned, it's been a mild winter, and we're paying a little bit below the $4 placeholder that we had, closer to $3.20 and $3.80. So we were actually able to reduce the negative variance utilities from $30,000 down to $10,000. We'll continue to keep watching that, but if I project out the gallons we've used to date and what I foresee us using to get us through April, because we'll still use oil, through April, I felt comfortable with adjusting that number. So overall, if you look at your in-district operating budget as of today, or as of March 3rd, we have $1,027 to spare. So It'll change, but as I've mentioned too in the budget presentation, if you look at special ed services and supplies, you'll see we're running almost like a negative 140,000 in that line item. One of the larger pieces in that is that we actually have an outside assistant who's working with some students here that is almost like having a payroll person in that line item, which is what's driving a lot of that. On the out-of-district side, we actually are continuing to see some fluctuations in placements and placement costs. So since your January report, we are seeing a larger negative variance in tuitions. It's up about 80,000. So we're looking at a $230,000 over budget on that category, and then a little bit over on transportation services. And part of the transportation services too is because we actually had some new placements in the year, but cost us more transportation cost. Some of those placements are one-year placements, so that's why we're still okay to not have an increase next year, even with the higher cost of accept. And then again, you can just refresh your information about the circuit breaker and the different pieces, because I think it's important to remember or point out that we did receive $211,000 in transportation costs, which does nicely offset almost $400,000 that we had last year in transportation costs.
Anything for Dawn on the monthly report? Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
Next, we have our annual vote on the school choice law. And maybe, Beth, I'll turn it to you just if you can sort of tee up the issue for us. I know that historically our school system has voted not to participate in school choice, but maybe you can provide a little background on why that is.
Sure. So all districts in Massachusetts have the option of providing school choice to students who live outside of their town boundaries to be able to tuition into, in this case, what would be Chickering. So if we provided that option, then students could apply or become part of a lottery to take seats here at Chickering, even if they lived in Natick or Medfield. The amount of money that we're given from the state is well below what we typically spend per pupil here in Dover and Sherburne. As you know, we take education very seriously, and so our per pupil expenditure is multiple times as much as we would get refunded. So in the past, the answer has been no, that we prefer not to be a school choice district. As you know, we look at our enrollment very carefully from year to year, and our sections have to be carefully calculated to say, once we get to that 21 and 22, we start thinking about adding a section. And so we obviously want to make sure that our own Dover students are accounted for first in terms of those sections before we start adding in additional members from outside of our district. So typically the vote has been no, but that is, of course, your choice to make again tonight. And Dawn and I or Denny can answer any questions that you have about the process or the program.
Questions from anyone? Goalie, did you? No?
No, I just wanted to understand the process. So if our school becomes school of choice, then our neighboring towns, they can enter in the lottery, right? And then if they get in to our school, then we get a fund from the state.
Yes.
And then that's much less than these
Right. And for some districts, larger districts, it might make sense because they need a greater revenue flow, or they have so many sections where a handful or X many kids is not going to make a difference. Here we're so tiny, it would.
Do they cap how many students a district allows in through school choice?
It's up to the district to decide.
You tell them how many seats that you want to put forward. Some districts will fund sort of like all their technology through school choice tuition. Residents here, though, have the opportunity to school choice into other districts. And if you looked closer at your Chapter 70, we don't really talk about Chapter 70 as much for you guys because the town sort of absorbs that. It doesn't have a huge impact on your budget. But you'll see that there might be one or two Dover or Sherburne residents who tuition out and go to other districts for various reasons.
Yeah.
And then we'll sort of get charged for that.
Yeah.
Other questions? Well, in keeping with our historical precedent, I'd like to invite a motion to have the Dover Schools not to participate in the school choice program for the 2023-2024 school year? Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. All in favor? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have our consent agenda, which consists of our meeting minutes from January 17th, 2023. Is there any discussion concerning minutes? All right, then I'd like to invite a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Liz Grossman, so moved.
Thank you, Liz. Is there a second? I should be asking any discussion? No. All right, all in favor? All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We have included in your packets communications for your information, the Regional School Committee minutes from December 6th and the Sherburne School Committee minutes from November 15th. Are there items that members would like to see reflected in the agenda for our next meeting, which will be on May 16th?
It's actually May 15th.
Oh, it's May 15th.
Yeah, I don't think that got updated.
Oh,
And
and
remember-
probably 2023.
Yeah, and remember that's a
Oh,
Monday. Remember that's a Monday night, so don't come Tuesday, you'll miss it. And the reason why Dover always meets on Monday for that particular night, it's election night, but it allows any members who are rolling off to participate in that meeting versus you getting voted on a Monday and have to show up on a Tuesday as your first meeting. So we had traditionally moved that
Yes.
to be the same night.
Well, thank you for that catch, Dawn. Yes, so our next meeting on May 15th, Monday evening.
I just have one thing. It's the Metro West Health Survey data. If we could
right.
hear a report on that for whatever makes sense for this
Sure.
age level. Yep.
Anyone else?
I just realized I didn't ask about health, but I heard through the grapevine that health came back to Chickering.
Health class.
Like the health course. I don't even know if it's a class. Do you know that? Yeah, the lessons. Like it's not a health class.
Development and maturation. Yeah.
Fifth grade class, I hosted 2 classes with Laura McGovern on human growth and maturation,
Yes.
where Laura taught the classes with students and in each classroom. So it was, Christine Atkinson and her class for 2 sessions right before February break, right in the middle of spring Spirit Week. This time. Yeah.
Day before Valentine's.
So you were tweaking it. I assume it went well.
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it did. Very well. And our nurse participated in some of the lessons. I think the ultimate goal is to transition that to perhaps a nurse role next year, but it hasn't been finalized.
Awesome.
There's often lots of questions about how that unit evolves as students get older. So in the new FAQ document around DEI, there's a question that kind of outlines how it becomes more in-depth as they move from 5th grade to 9th grade.
And Laura is going to do the class with the current 6th graders because they missed it last year.
Anything else? All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? Julie, second. All in favor? All right. We are adjourned at 8:08 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.